Today, I'm excited to welcome Jim Crider to the podcast. Jim is a financial planner helping families achieve financial independence and a Bitcoin maxi. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Jim.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Well, it's great to chat with you. So, before we get to Bitcoin, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you became a financial planner.
Yeah, I a little over a decade ago, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do as a long-term career. I was in my mid-20s and started thinking about money itself. And money is the number one cause of divorce year after year. It's a very large cause of individual stress and suicide. And yeah, I really wanted to help people have healthier money conversations and be able to be more articulate with what they value in life, and then help them use their money efficiently and effectively for what they actually value. Um, I didn't know what that actually entailed from a career perspective. I didn't know what a financial planner was or what the career really looked like. I just knew I wanted to help people have healthier conversations. So I just started down that rabbit hole, and here I am 10, 11 years later. I love what I do.
Yeah, I can tell from some of your interviews that you really love it and that you love helping people. Did you know back then what sound money was?
No, I I had heard about Bitcoin in 2012, but ignored it, and then became curious 2016, but was curious from a more of just an investment thesis, not a it's money thesis. And it was really March of 2020 that everything became very clear that our money system's broken. And fortunately, at that point, I'd already had a decent amount of exposure to Bitcoin, also gold, real estate, and obviously equity markets. March of 20, when I think it was before the government started printing out money to hand out through COVID relief checks and things like that here in the States. But there are talks of this happening. And in that moment, I realized if they can shut down our economy, but still hand out money, that money is not real. And I need to figure out what is real money. And that's something that was sort of hard to come to terms with. At that point, I'd been working in money for, I don't know, 6, 7 years, but had never stopped to ask what money is. So I spent just a couple weeks doing a deep dive, each on Bitcoin, gold, real estate, and again, I guess further into equities to see money and the monetization of assets, and came out that with full on Bitcoin maxi. Yeah, it maybe took me a week or two because again, I'd had exposure to these things for several years, but it was an open mind for a couple of weeks that led me there. So that was after I'd been working in personal finance for, I don't know, 5, 6 years, about 6 years, I guess. But at that point, I was at another firm, and it was very difficult to help the families I got to serve in the way I really wanted to, considering that Bitcoin was off limits. So the writing was on the wall for many reasons that I need to go step out and start my own company.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's one of the best things you've done, working for yourself.
I love it. I've always been very entrepreneurial since I was young, and yeah, I really like Bitcoin a lot. I like personal finance a lot, but my favorite thing is, or one of my favorite things, is actually running and building a business. I love that part, which is, that's I could stop building the company now and make a good living and enjoy what I do. But if I want to impact more lives, which I'm highly motivated to do, that means I have to keep my foot on the gas to scale this to an enterprise. I was talking to a group of people yesterday, and they asked me why I continue to grow my business, and I told them that, last month we brought on 5 clients to our company, and had I not brought those 5 on because I felt complacent with where I am from an income and business perspective, those 5 families would have gone to some goofball down the road who probably doesn't do the type of tax planning we do, the type of other areas of general financial planning that we do, and certainly would not talk to them about Bitcoin. And to me, that's disturbing. And I want to be able to help and impact those lives. So again, that highly motivates me to, all right, if they're not getting the help out there that I think they should, then I'll continue to grow and impact more people.
I heard you say you've helped over 100 families so far get into Bitcoin. And many financial planners don't, as you say. They're not ready for Bitcoin. Let's put it that way. What's your process of orange pilling people on Bitcoin?
So you have to consider that I'm invited to a trusted and privileged position in people's lives. That's why people hire me and our company, because they trust us from our expertise and from a vulnerability perspective and all these things. So when they come to us, I don't expect them to carte blanche follow what I say without thinking. I don't want that. I tend to over explain everything because I want our clients to fully understand and have deep conviction. Now, with that said, I do recognize that my orange pilling availability is more privileged than most. Talking with some guy on the street or a family member or a longtime friend is harder than talking with a client who has literally, hired me to tell them about money. With that said, it goes the same way across the board. If I'm talking with a client or if I'm talking with someone at the grocery store or a friend or family, for them to actually understand Bitcoin, in my opinion, they have to understand that Bitcoin is money. I believe that if we lead off, for most people, there are some people who, if you lead off with the tech side of things, that will work fine. But again, if you lead with hash rate or I don't know, more technical sides of Bitcoin, you're still trying to present a solution to the problem they don't know exists. So what we do is I mentioned that Bitcoin is money. It's the best form of money that's ever been created or discovered. And in order to understand why Bitcoin is a solution to something, you have to understand that there's an issue with money and thus understand the history of money and stores of value. So I take them through a history lesson. And this is, before we go into that, I do let them air any issues they have with Bitcoin. I think that's outrageously important and I think often overlooked. We can get so excited to tell someone about Bitcoin that we just dive in and word vomit on them, and they're taken aback. And a lot of times, we're getting to a point now where most people have heard about Bitcoin in some capacity. Unfortunately, most people have heard about it through a negative lens. And if you just come to them and tell them all these facts, and they feel like they have a better piece of information that you're somehow not aware of, but that they read in a hit piece a few years ago about Bitcoin boiling the oceans, or it's used by drug cartels or whatever, they're going to feel like they've got the gotcha card. And the moment you're done talking, they're going to pull that out and they won the argument. So there's no reason for them to listen. So you have to allow them you have to give them permission to, all right, tell me what you know or have heard or understand about this in any way. One that allows you to gauge where you approach it from. Like, I know nothing. Perfect. We're going to go from here. Or I know a lot about the computational side. Okay, we're going to approach it from this direction or this level of verbiage. But then again, I think the more important piece here is if allowing them to disarm themselves with the hostilities they probably have towards Bitcoin, get that out there and address that. Then you can go with a clean slate and address Bitcoin. And again, in order to do that, I feel it's best to address what is money, what are stores of value, walk them through a history up until, I'd say post 1971, maybe allude to petrodollar system if you'd like. You start getting in the weeds pretty deep, and then switch over to cryptography and this dream of internet-based money since the 70s, and the hard work that's been put in here from really the 70s, 80s, the 90s were a very big decade with cryptography and trying to figure this thing out. So addressing that point specifically for internet-based money allows them to see that this is not a new fad that was just created out of thin air for no apparent reason. This is something that people have been working on for a long time that presented very difficult technical issues. Once you've done that and you speak to the ingenious side of Satoshi, his ability to crack those two nuts that couldn't be cracked for decades of the Byzantines general and a internet or a digital scarcity. If you can address those, the fact that he was able to crack those two nuts, plus they understand now what money is and what money should be and where we're at, I think the logical conclusion is I should probably own some of this. And I have a 100% success rate of orange pilling. And the next question is usually, okay, well, how much do I own? Do I buy it all at once or do I buy it over time? How do I buy it? How do I store it? So you'd have this natural progression of a conversation, and it works great. And again, That's a lot easier when you have a captive audience versus, the hardest people to orange pill are maybe like uh, relatives of yours or longtime friends. That's I have um, good friends of mine whose parents I've known since I was a kid, and I'm really good at what I do for a living. I am a really good financial planner. I study this stuff constantly, and yeah, but I have some very good family friends who will not hire me because I know in their heads they view me as Jim, the 12-year-old kid who used to come and stay the night at their house and eat all their candy. They don't see me as a competent adult, and that's really the reason why it can be hard to orange pill relatives and long term friends is they're viewing you through the lens of that familiarity bias versus hearing what you're actually saying. So if you can actually speak to the message rather than the you as the person, I think that can go a long ways.
Well, and I really love that you allow them to air their thoughts on it first. I think that's so useful to so many of us because so many of us want to help people that we like. But if you start with letting them say, well, what have you heard about it? And so, like you said, they're not waiting the whole time to say, well, yeah, it's fraud or it's used by criminals or, yeah, I really like that. But do you include inflation in your speech? Because I often go to inflation.
Yes, that is part of this history of money is talking to how inflation's taken place through history through different mechanisms. So I'll speak to the old tropes of Bitcoiners, the Rhinestones with the app people talking through different types of coinage, debasement in Rome. We'll talk through hyperinflation post World War One. We'll talk through gold confiscation and how that was inflation. Gold was confiscated for $20 an ounce and repriced immediately after it became illegal for a U.S. citizen to own it outside of ornamental jewelry. That the gold did not immediately become worth way more. The dollar which they gave you in exchange for your gold was debased. So if you can approach inflation and this confiscation of value from different angles, again, you're just painting a picture to something that they've never even stopped to consider. And that's the really interesting thing about Bitcoin and money is most people have never stopped to actually ask, what is money? And I know as Bitcoiners, that's a very basic question, but I think that it's basic because that's really where most of us started with our Bitcoin journey. Maybe you got into Bitcoin because you can make a lot of money, but then once you actually got Bitcoin, it's because you asked, what is money? Yeah, you've got to go there. And it is interesting to consider that most people have never stopped to ask that. That's where it's hard in my industry is I know a lot of people who are really smart with managing money, managing from a like equity compensation planning and business consulting and tax planning and retirement and estate and all these fields of financial planning, but they've never stopped to ask, what is money? And that you get to a point where that feels foolish because, well, I've managed billions of dollars for decades. What do you mean I'm going to stop and ask what is money? But again, you have to go back and be willing to ask those very basic questions, become a child and relearn these things from the ground up. Otherwise, it's not going to make sense.
So in the US and most of the Western world, we're still using Bitcoin as a store of value. And it is quite volatile to be money yet, right? So how do you get around that?
So from a speaking to it perspective, like if someone brings it up as, yeah, but it's too volatile to use as a means of payment, you can approach that from a couple angles. One is helping people understand that there's a big difference between volatility and risk. And unfortunately, people have made those things synonymous. Volatility and risk, they become more correlated as time horizons get compressed. But if you sit on a mattress filled with dollars for the next 40 years, that's incredibly risky. If I'm able to squeeze how many dollar bills can squeeze into a mattress. Anyways, let's say I can squeeze 100 grand into my mattress at my house. I sew it in and that's what I sleep on for the next 40 years. That $100,000 is not moving. It's sitting there. It's not going up and down. Whatever. It's flat. That feels very safe, but it is outrageously risky because over that 40 years, the purchasing power of that $100,000 will be annihilated. So it feels comfortable and there's very low volatility, super risky. You own Bitcoin over the last decade. You've had extreme volatility, but at the end of the day, your purchasing power went absolutely through the roof. Now, obviously, if you have $10 right now and you need that $10 on the dot tomorrow, if it was $9.99 tomorrow, you couldn't do what you needed to, then you should probably keep it in dollars. The upside of having $10.10 tomorrow is not worth the risk. So again, as time horizons get compressed, they do get more synonymous or correlated. But yeah, that's really important. People, they mix those up too much. The other piece is helping understand really what the use cases of money. We've become so used to money simply being currency and a means of payment that we've also become used to unaware of the other functions that money are supposed to be: store of value, and obviously there's signaling to what things cost as well. Yeah, when you're used to having, we'll call it 2.8% or whatever CPI has been historically over my lifetime. When you're used to having 2 to 10% of your wealth stolen per year, that's normal for money. And another normal thing for money is for you to be able to go and you see what something is priced in and you give those means of payment. That's what we've said money is. Bitcoin is approaching it from another perspective, at least in the West. It's primarily store of value, and then secondarily these things, despite the fact it's secondarily right now, despite the fact that it can do those other things, a form of payment, much better than the dollar can in reality, for better settlement and lots of reasons. So allowing them to, again, realize that their small definition of even the use cases of money is uninformed, and it has only been informed by their experience at a very small time of history.
So in the long run, you believe it'll be the dominant form of money and that we will all use it as a medium of exchange?
Yes, I do. I personally do see that. Now, I can see that coming about through two ways. One, yes, everything is priced in Bitcoin and sats. I think that makes a lot of sense. The other means I can see this happening is the US dollar and other major nation state currencies are simply backed by Bitcoin. So I still price things in dollars and pay in dollars, but those dollars are backed by Bitcoin. I could see that as well, where obviously one great thing about Bitcoin is it's much easier to audit than the US gold supply. So we know that, yes, this dollar is directly backed by this many sats. So yeah, I would see that. I believe that will play out. I believe it was Charlie Munger, maybe it was Warren, who said this in 2021, that they believe that the US dollar will not be the primary reserve currency in the world by the end of this century. They did not give an opinion as to what they think it will be. They're pretty sympathetic to China. So I would guess that they probably have China in mind when they made that statement. Maybe they thought it would be some sort of petrodollar system or maybe petro-backed currency. I don't know. But yeah, but they were probably sympathetic to China when they made that statement. Anyways, even they have recognized that US dollar is probably not going to be the primary reserve currency. And I would agree. Unless the dollar is backed by Bitcoin, then we will stand another generation or two.
And they definitely wouldn't have thought Bitcoin. But what I wanted to just go back to is the inflation. I heard recently that we all heard that over COVID, 40% of the US dollar was printed ever. And now I've heard recently that over the past 5 years that 80% has been printed. Have you heard that?
I haven't looked or heard that number specifically. I know it's an incredible amount of money that we have created over the last several years, and I know my personal wallet feels it. Every time I go to the grocery store, I went to the grocery store on, what was it, Saturday night. My wife and I went on a date. So our date night was, we picked up hamburger and took it to my office and ate there. We met some friends, had a double date where we got food to go and ate our food and played board games in my office. That date itself cost what we bought some food for our kids, like made them a super simple dinner. It was like, macaroni and cheese and chicken nuggets, like simple things. I went to the store, got like bananas, mac and cheese, chicken nuggets, like just some quick stuff. It was like $80. And then we got our burger to go. Like a burger was like 20 something bucks. And then we came to the office and ate, and then we paid a babysitter. The babysitter that night for 3 hours, I think we paid her like $75. Like a date night of food to go and playing board games was couple $100. That's outrageous. Babysitters didn't get more valuable. She did a great job. So if you listen to this, you did a great job. Your parents are raising you well. But no, that babysitter is not suddenly like she didn't do 10 times the work that a babysitter did 30 years ago. The money in which I'm paying her just got massively devalued. It's irritating. I'm fortunate enough to where my wife and I can still do that on occasion. We can do things like that. But there's other people who maybe you live on a fixed income or you get a 2% raise every year. It's like, all right, inflation's 10%. Your real life inflation's 10%. My real life inflation, I would say, is higher than 10%. I have 4 kids and they're all growing. So every year our groceries get way more expensive. And clothes and shoes, all these things. Like my life inflation is way higher than CPI. Let's say yours is 10% and your increase at your work is 2, or Social Security. They gave a cost of living adjustment this year, sub 3%. Like, all right, if your lifestyle just went up by 10% and Uncle Sam gave you an increase of 2, you can afford to do 8% less things. There goes your savings rate. There's rules of thumb. Generally, people say you should try to save 10 to 15% of your income for long term. That, or at least half of that, just got wiped out because of inflation this year alone. That's really frustrating. That puts people in a really tight bind. Hey, you should enjoy spending time with your wife, your spouse, your family. But hey, we're gonna take away the means of you being able to do things that you value. Even eventually, we're gonna have you squeezed so tight that you're just going to constantly feel pressure. So when you are with those people you love, if you allow yourself to, you can become just stressed all the time. And again, that's where it goes back. Like money's the number one cause of stress and divorce and all these things. And a lot of people feel like the pressure's on. I actually mentioned this the other day on Twitter that Bitcoin has allowed me personally to feel less need. I don't want to use the word anxiety. I never felt anxious, but less pressure to have a high savings rate compared to how I used to feel. So when I was in my mid 20s and mid to late 20s, my wife and I, we had a really high savings rate of about 45%. It's not because we made a bunch of money. It's because we were really poor in our early 20s and we became so used to not having any money that by the time we started making any, we just put that extra aside and saved really well. And at that point, that was before I really understood Bitcoin. So I was looking at building a real estate portfolio and a TradFi type portfolio. And, it's like, man, I better save a whole lot of money if I'm going to have early financial freedom. And the pressure was on. And then, of course, part of this is alleviated from early savings and investing for sure. But then just investing and saving into a better asset of Bitcoin, knowing I own this asset that's not a melting ice cube, all this work is not on me. If I own VTI, and that in reality keeps pace with my lifestyle inflation, I have to save 100% what I'm going to need down the line. This opens up so much without you even asking me a question.
And it's funny because that is what I was going to ask you about that tweet you did, because having Bitcoin makes it feel much better just knowing that you have something that's going up in value.
I've had to. These things are so obvious to Bitcoin people and should be obvious to everyone, but unfortunately it's not. Financial competence is very low. I've had to explain to probably thousands of people why saving the dollar, putting all of your wealth into a dollar for multiple decades is usually a really bad idea. It's like, hey, if you save 100% of your income this year, maybe you make 80 grand. Okay. You make $80,000 and you save 100% of that. And in 30 years, you want to retire. And at that point, you're going to need $80,000 per year. You have to save, in nominal terms, you have to save 100% of your income. But in real terms, you have to save twice that, 3 times that. If you're just going to break even in 30 years when you retire, you have to every year. You have to have a greater than 100% savings rate if you're going to save in the dollar. Then if you're going to save in an asset that keeps pace with inflation, okay, now you can save 100%, or you're going to count for maybe Social Security or something like that. Now you can save a little bit less than 100%. Or okay, I'm gonna expect inflation to be 3.2%, but I'm gonna expect my investments to get 8%. Okay, now you're talking about compounding, and you can actually save significantly less than 100%, but you just better save a lot. If you're saving in hard money and you think that your life is in real terms going to be deflationary compared to the asset you own, Now I get to a point where it's like, yeah, I can actually afford to not save that much. And I don't want this to come across like I'm saying don't save. Most Bitcoiners are very motivated to save a lot. I'm saying this sort of counter this thought of, something I see a lot on Twitter is that I don't have enough Bitcoin. I'll never have enough Bitcoin. I need to save more, which I understand. Again, my wife and I, we saved 45% of our income for 5 years. And then we just happened to do really well with that money, be at a place where, yeah, by 30, I was pretty financially independent. I'm 34 right now. And yeah, like I don't need to save any more money for retirement, and I'll be way more than fine. But again, I think I feel that comfortable because of the asset that I own. Otherwise, I'd be sitting here, I'd be scrambling trying to find which next duplex to buy, because I would feel like I'm constantly on this hamster wheel trying to keep pace with this ever-changing goalpost of needs. That's where our money is so hurtful. If we're trying to measure what you're going to need in the future, but the means of measurement keeps getting changed because of the money printer, it's hard to set proper goals. That sort of goes with Bitcoin. It's hard to plan around Bitcoin. Like I don't use a financial planning software for our clients. If I put Bitcoin into like a Monte Carlo system that's inside of a financial planning software, it'd break the thing. Like if you talk about me personally, like what I own a business that I think is valued pretty well, and I think will eventually be valued really well. I own Bitcoin, and I own a couple of stocks, and those stocks are all Bitcoin centric as well. If I put my personal asset base into a financial planning software in a Monte Carlo simulation, it's useless. So I do admit that, yes, the ruler that which we're measuring value with Bitcoin is ever changing. And that's because everything else is trying to figure out how to be priced into Bitcoin, versus the ruler that the dollar for valuation is ever changing, because we're ever changing the actual dollar itself. So it's working backwards from Bitcoin. Everything else is trying to figure out where to be priced in Bitcoin. The dollar is trying to figure out how to price everything else.
Everything priced in Bitcoin is falling, and the real estate example is one of the best. But I'm just going back to what you said in the beginning. You basically got Bitcoin in 1 to 2 weeks, and you didn't go through an altcoin journey. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And then pretty much retired by 30. So you obviously pick up things really quickly. Why do you think more financial planners don't?
Maybe ego. I'm the type of guy. I was a really good student when I was young. And then in like middle school, high school, a few things happened that made me feel that maybe I was sort of stupid or something, or at least it impacted how I thought I could learn. Like when I was little, I thought I was super smart. And then there were a few things in school that sort of messed with me from a learning perspective. Like I remember in 8th grade, my English teacher, we had to read a book. And I found out right before we had our test for the book, I found out I was like the only person in class who actually read the book, and everyone else used a summary of the book and stuff. Everyone else did that in the class. And I remember on the test, I got an 80 and everyone else got 100 on the test. And I couldn't figure out why. And they said, oh, he used the same quiz that they had on cliffnotes.com. I was like, oh, so I was quote unquote taught in 8th grade that it doesn't make sense to read the book. You are rewarded for not reading and just cheating the system. So from 8th grade until post college, I never read a book. Little things like that really messed with me. And then after I was like post college, when I stumbled into personal finance and financial planning, I refound my love of learning and really unpacking things. Because at that point, it actually became valuable for me. I knew that I really wanted to impact people's lives. And the more I know, the more I can impact and benefit people. So at that point, it was incredibly motivating for me to learn as much as I could, as deep as I could. So I started realizing, okay, like I have to be okay with looking foolish. So I'm the type of guy who I'm like in a classroom setting, I'm either in the back of the class pacing back and forth, looking like I'm not paying attention, but in reality, I'm soaking it up, or I'm sitting on the very front row and I'm raising my hand to ask all the dumb questions. We're talking about money, and I'm going to raise my hand and say, hold on real quick before you go on and talk about building upon this topic of money. Can you explain to me real quick, what is money? And most people sigh when you hear a dumb question, but I have to understand things in a simplistic manner for things to build on one another. So, and I don't let things be glossed over when they're being explained to me. And I think a lot of other people will because the fear of looking foolish. I'd rather look foolish and actually be smart than look smart and be a fool. So maybe that's not it. Maybe, um, maybe it's compensation. I've unfortunately talked to a lot of people who, hey, I think I might understand this Bitcoin thing, but the firm I work at won't let me talk about it. And I don't want to go start my own because I make a lot of money where I'm at right now. And to me, that's non-negotiable. It's like, all right, if I think this is really what's best for people, I need to do this, even if it's going to hurt me. I got in this industry so I could actually help people, not so I can get the fattest wallet possible. So I think hubris and ego and maybe competing priorities probably are some of the biggest issues with this.
Yeah, those are some really good points. So, how has Bitcoin changed you?
So Bitcoin I've been doing this, working with people in financial planning for about a decade now, and obviously, as I mentioned earlier, I'm highly motivated to do absolutely what I feel is best for our clients from what they tell me what they value in life. That's what I view money as a tool to help you do what's important to you in life. My job is to help you articulate what it is that you value and then help you align your resources in the most efficient and effective way for that. That is what I do. And a large part of my conviction is knowing as much as I possibly can about every tool that's available to be able to help you in your financial life. And I think Bitcoin is a phenomenal tool. So going through prior halving cycles and bull runs on my own certainly was exciting and fun and everything. But the honor and privilege of having 100 other families who have trusted me to be their guide in their financial life and having them on this journey with me is super fulfilling.
So, it's like giving you another sense of purpose.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. It's pretty funny, It's I have a lot of people I've convinced to buy Bitcoin over the years, and they a lot of them like deeply understand this now, but still have never this is their first bull run. So I'll routinely get people reaching out and saying, hey, like it turns out you were right, and just thanking me for introducing them and all this, and it's really fun helping. It's not about the money. It's about what the money's there for and being able to actually help people do and realize these things that they've articulated for years what they value for themselves, their families, and now it's possible. Yeah, it's fantastic to be able to help people with that.
And where can people find you?
Yeah. So my X or Twitter is at Jim Crider TX as in Texas. So at Jim Crider TX. And then our website is Intentional Living FP as in financial planning. So intentionallivingfp.com. On there's my calendar for 15 minutes. More than happy if you want to throw a time on there. If you have, even if it's just a one-off question of, hey, I have this thing going on with my 401k plan, or I had this question about a weird tax thing, more than happy to talk with you and help you out the best I can. Or if you want to talk about seeing if or how I could help you or your family with your financial planning, any way I can help, more than happy to help.
That's kind. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jim.
Yeah. Thanks, Paula.